It started with a scream in the middle of a London department store, a voice trembling with fear, another filled with rage, and the sound of something fragile breaking against marble floors. People froze, turned, whispered. Phones came out to record. And among the staring faces stood Ethan Carter, a single father holding his little girl's hand, unaware that what he was about to do, one impulsive act of kindness, would change his entire life. Ethan Carter worked as a delivery driver for a local courier company in South London. Every morning began the same, rushing his 7-year-old daughter Lily to school, sipping cold coffee in traffic, and dreaming quietly of a better life. Since his wife had passed away 3 years ago, he'd built his world around Lily. His days were simple: work, home, bedtime stories. Yet beneath his calm smile, there lived a quiet exhaustion. A man who gave everything but received so little in return. That afternoon, after a long delivery run, Ethan promised Lily a small treat, a stop at Kensington Square, where the windows of luxury stores gleamed like glass dreams. They walked hand in hand past perfume counters and designer handbags, giggling as Lily tried on sunglasses too big for her face. Just as Ethan reached for his wallet, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Stop her! That girl just stole it!" Heads turned. Near the counter, a young woman in a wheelchair sat frozen, her trembling hands clutching a small silk scarf. Her pale face drained of color as 2 security guards surrounded her. Lily squeezed Ethan's hand. "Daddy?" She looked scared. Ethan looked down at his daughter, then at the terrified woman. Something inside him refused to look away. The store manager, a middle-aged woman with a clipped accent, sneered. "We've had enough of these scams. Pretending to be disabled just to gain sympathy." Her words sliced through the silence. The girl's lips quivered. "I didn't take it. I was just touching it. It fell off the rack." People watched, murmuring, recording. Ethan's heart pounded. He could walk away. It wasn't his business. But then he saw Lily's eyes, wide and confused, looking up at him as if asking what the right thing to do was. He stepped forward. "That's enough. You've got no proof she stole anything," he said, his voice steady but firm. The manager glared. "Who are you to interfere, sir?" "Someone who still believes in decency," Ethan replied. He turned to the girl. "It's all right. Just tell them what happened." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to touch it. I can't even move fast enough to steal if I wanted to." Ethan crouched beside her, his hand resting gently on her chair. "You don't have to prove yourself to anyone." The manager scoffed. "Security, call the police." And that S when a tall man near the entrance, someone who I'd been silently watching, turned and walked away, unnoticed. The police arrived minutes later. Ethan stood his ground as the officers questioned the girl. She gave her name, Clara Wells, her voice soft but trembling. She explained she was paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident 2 years ago. She had only come to the store to buy a gift for her nurse's birthday. One officer noticed the security camera above. After a tense few minutes, the footage cleared everything. The scarf had fallen from the rack, and Clara had picked it up, only for the staff to assume theft. The manager paled, muttering half-hearted apologies. Ethan sighed in relief. But as Clara's wheelchair rolled away, he noticed her eyes were still filled with humiliation, not gratitude. Outside, Ethan caught up to her. "Hey, you don't deserve what they did to you," he said. Clara looked up, hesitant. "You shouldn't have stepped in. People like me, we just make trouble for others." Ethan smiled softly. "Then I guess I'm trouble too." Lily giggled beside him. "You're our hero today," she said to Clara, handing her a small flower from her hair. And for the first time, Clara smiled. Days passed, but Ethan couldn't stop thinking about that moment. Something about Clara's loneliness haunted him. She lived alone, he learned, in a small, accessible flat in Camden, surviving on disability benefits and rare freelance art jobs. One rainy evening, Ethan found himself outside her building with a bag of groceries. "Don't say I'm stalking you," he joked when she opened the door, surprised. "Just thought you could use some help." Clara blinked back emotion. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "You're kind. You're strong. And you didn't deserve what happened." Inside, her flat was small but filled with art, charcoal sketches of faces, cityscapes, and a half-finished portrait of a little girl that looked oddly like Lily. Ethan admired it quietly. "You draw emotions," he said. She smiled faintly. "I draw what I can't say." For the first time in years, both of them felt seen. Over the next weeks, Ethan and Lily became frequent visitors. Clara taught Lily to paint, and Lily in turn filled Clara's silent flat with laughter. Their bond grew gently, like light through a cracked window. But behind her shy smiles, Clara hid something, a pain she never spoke of. Sometimes Ethan caught her staring out the window at the city skyline, eyes heavy with memories. One evening she whispered, "Do you ever wish life gave second chances?" Ethan thought of his late wife, the years of struggle, and nodded. Every day, unbeknownst to both, far across the city in a glass tower overlooking the Thames, a powerful businessman named Edward Wells sat watching a news clip, the one where a man defended a disabled girl accused of theft. His assistant paused the video. "Sir, isn't that—" Edward's eyes darkened. "Yes," he said coldly. "That's my daughter." Edward Wells was one of London's wealthiest investors, ruthless, respected, feared. But behind his empire lay a shattered family. After Clara's accident, grief and guilt tore them apart. He blamed himself for the crash that paralyzed her, and instead of facing that guilt, he buried it under work. Seeing her again in such a humiliating situation reopened everything he had buried. Yet pride chained him in silence. Instead of reaching out, he ordered a private investigator to learn more about Ethan Carter, the man who defended her. Meanwhile, Clara had no idea her father even knew. She continued sketching with Lily, laughing again after years of isolation. And Ethan, quietly falling for her, found himself torn between admiration and guilt. He wasn't rich or educated. What could a man like him offer a woman like her? Still, every time she smiled, he felt whole again. One afternoon, Ethan's boss called him in. "I'm sorry, Ethan, we've had a complaint about your behavior at Kensington Square." Ethan froze. "What behavior?" "The store reported you for creating a disturbance. Our client relationships matter. I have to suspend you." It was a blow he hadn't expected. His job was his lifeline. As he walked home in the rain, Lily's small hand in his, the weight of kindness turned into consequence. When Clara found out, she was horrified. "It's my fault," she said, tears streaming. "I'll fix it." "No," Ethan said softly. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone decent should have done." But in her heart, Clara vowed she would make things right, even if it meant confronting the past she had spent years avoiding. Clara visited her father's office for the first time since the accident. The receptionist froze, recognizing her instantly. When Edward stepped out and saw her, he went pale. "Clara." His voice cracked, years of silence pressing between them. "I didn't come for pity," she said. "I came because someone stood up for me when you didn't." Edward looked away. "You don't understand." "No, you don't," she snapped. "I lost my legs, my art, my trust. But that man, a stranger, gave me back my dignity." Edward's jaw clenched. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," she said. "But I won't let him suffer because of me." Using her father's influence, Clara had the complaint withdrawn. Ethan was reinstated within a week, though he never knew how it happened. When he thanked her, she simply said, "Let's just call it even." But something had shifted. The walls she had built for years began to crumble. Ethan saw the warmth behind her guarded eyes, and she saw the honesty behind his quiet strength. Their evenings grew longer. Dinners, laughter, shared stories about loss, about Lily's dreams, about the art Clara wished she could still paint with full freedom. Ethan fixed her wheelchair one evening, carefully tightening the bolts, his hands gentle. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. He smiled. Because someone should. Weeks later, Clara invited Ethan and Lily to an art exhibition, her first public showing since the accident. Nervous but proud, she displayed her collection under the theme Unbroken. Each canvas told a story of resilience, shadows and light intertwined. When she unveiled her final painting, the audience gasped. It was of a man shielding a woman in a wheelchair from an angry crowd, the exact scene at the store. The title beneath it read, "Defended by Kindness." Ethan stood frozen, his eyes misting. "You painted me." She smiled softly. "You reminded me that courage still exists." From the back of the room, Edward Wells watched silently, tears in his eyes for the first time in years. After the exhibition, Edward approached Ethan outside. "You're the man from the store," he said. Ethan nodded. "And you're her father." Edward extended his hand. "You saved her. I owe you more than I can ever say." Ethan shook his head. "No one owes me anything. Just be there for her." That night, Edward visited Clara. Their reunion was quiet but raw, years of pain spilling into forgiveness. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything." Clara leaned into him, tears falling. "Then let's start over." Months passed. Clara's art flourished, Ethan's job improved, and Lily became the light of both their lives. They began spending weekends together in the countryside, where Clara sketched wildflowers and Ethan cooked simple meals. One evening by the fire, Clara looked at Ethan. "You know what's strange? You walked into my life because of a misunderstanding, and now I can't imagine it without you." He chuckled. "I think that's how fate works. Messy but meaningful." Lily looked between them and said innocently, "Can we keep her, Daddy?" Clara laughed through tears. "I think that's the sweetest proposal I've ever heard." But happiness rarely comes without one last test. Edward's business empire faced a major scandal, investors fleeing, tabloids circling. The stress threatened to undo everything he'd rebuilt. Clara wanted to help, but Edward refused her involvement. "You've been through enough," he said. Ethan, however, stood by him. "Let me help," he offered. "I know people who trust me. Maybe we can rebuild this together." Through late nights and shared determination, Ethan's humble honesty began restoring Edward's reputation. For the first time, Edward saw him not as a working-class stranger, but as the man who had saved his family. When the storm passed, Edward invited Ethan and Clara to dinner at his home. Over wine and laughter, he raised a toast. "To the man who reminded me that integrity isn't T about wealth, it S about heart." Clara smiled through tears, holding Ethan's hand under the table. Later that night, as they walked under the streetlights, Ethan stopped. "You sure you're ready for this?" She nodded. "I'm ready for everything that comes next. With you." A year later, a small art studio opened in Camden, Lily's Light. It was co-founded by Ethan and Clara, named after the little girl who had brought hope to them both. Inside the studio hung a framed photograph, Ethan, Clara, Lily, and Edward, together at last, smiling. Below it, a quote read, "One act of kindness can change a life, or several." And as the evening light poured through the windows, Clara whispered to Ethan, "You didn't just defend me that day. You defended the person I was afraid to be again." He kissed her forehead gently. Then I guess we both found what we were missing.